Hello everyone, and welcome to our session on the future of multi-experience commerce. My name is Jonathan Whiteside, and I'm the Principal Technology Consultant of international digital agency DEPT. And today I'm joined by James Dye, who is the UK Commercial Director of Headless Technology Specialists commercetools. So for the next 35 minutes or so, you're going to be listening in to a conversation between the two of us about the rapidly changing landscape of how people buy and also how we sell to our customers. But you can get involved. So if you've got any questions, any comments, then please add them into the questions box next to this video. And towards the end, we'll try and read out and answer and discuss as many as we can as possible. So one thing is definitely for sure. In this new digital reality, consumers and buyers are looking for seamless commerce experiences that extend beyond the traditional web shop experience, from voice assistants to live video shopping, augmented reality, shopping in social apps. The future of commerce is very multi-experience. It's been talked about for years, and I'm sure you've been to similar sessions for years, but I think certainly over the past year, we've got to the point where technology innovation has started to catch up with some of the concepts and some of the ideas we've had. And it's actually quite possible to do these things now. So starting off our conversation, James, over the past year, we've obviously seen digital innovation rapidly evolve. And in your role at commercetools, you're quite lucky to speak to a lot of different organizations who are on that commerce journey, whether it be traditional companies and kind of struggling and grappling about how to transform and how to evolve from where they are, to also cutting edge companies who are wanting to kind of do the next thing or the next thing for the next 5 years. So based on these conversations you have with these sorts of companies, what kind of trends or common themes are you seeing as you go and speak to them?
Yeah, I think the acceleration of innovation and change is actually the trend that we're seeing. I think pandemic has really brought that out. There's some retailers and companies out there that haven't been able to change, and they've really, really struggled, and unfortunately we've lost a number. And then there's those that have been able to adapt, and those are the ones that have been really successful, and some of them have had sort of their best years ever. And I think the ability to change is really important, and it comes from two areas. One is technology, and the other is the mindset of a business. And in terms of technology, a lot of businesses and retailers are really stuck on very old, legacy, monolithic, complicated systems, which weren't built for today. They weren't built for change. They were built for a day when there was one channel, and that was web. And now customer expectations are constantly increasing. They expect this omni-channel, seamless experience. Also, retail is constantly changing. The only certainty in retail really is uncertainty. And you do need to be able to adapt to that, and you need to and all these old systems come with, when you're trying to make change, come with big time frames, big risk, big budgets. None of those things are wanted in today's retail environment. You want to be able to pivot, you want to be able to make small choices, run small experiments, and they're the businesses that are kind of are really winning. Not all of those experiments will be successful. Some of them will fail. You want to fail quickly. You want to learn from those failures. You want to make sure it's not painful. But the ones that the ones that do succeed are the ones that really differentiate you in the marketplace. And I think a lot of retailers are stuck with these systems that are so risky that they have to bunch all their changes together, and they do something called a release cycle. So if you're lucky, you might have a monthly release cycle. So you get 12 changes a year, 12 chances to test something. And you compare that with the likes of Amazon, who are, I think, pushing code live every 12 seconds. Like, how do you compete with that? So we're now seeing the leading retailers come to us and say, okay, we're a retailer, we can't be a pure technology business, but how can we emulate some of these the Netflix, the Amazons, the Zalandos of the world, and get some of that flexibility and agility and the freedom that they have? And a big thing that we're seeing is this move to microservices. So the concept of taking big, complicated systems, breaking them up into your Lego blocks, making sure those blocks are decoupled, that they communicate through APIs, and that kind of gives these companies a lot of freedom.
That seems like not just a big technology change, but also kind of a change in mindset in terms of how these retailers think. As you say, they're not kind of pure play digital disruptors like the ones that you've named are. So how do these these companies, these retailers, these brands who are trying to move in that direction, what's the sort of things that they need to change in terms of mindset, thinking, organisation that kind of sets them up to be able to emulate, even within the more traditional enterprise organisation, into kind of the mindset of a startup?
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I think the companies we've worked with, I've seen that. You have to, there's a lot of baggage and bureaucracy that came with these big risky systems because you had to have those processes in place to protect businesses. Now change is not this big scary thing anymore. You kind of really have to democratize that change and push it down to the people who understand the pain, who have the ability to fix it. Kind of big move from being a thinking business, which people had to be, to being a doing business. And I think that's it really is a mindset change for senior management, because they go from having to wanting to make all the decisions. So now what they're doing is setting the governance, setting the strategy, setting the vision, but saying to the team, we want you to deliver. And we've really seen that kind of as part of the acceleration of innovation. So Lego, I think they admit, struggled with this at first, but now they've really embraced this way of working. And I think they were up 21% this year, had the best year they've ever had. And you might expect that from Lego. They're kind of well known in the digital kind of tech space, but we're seeing it from businesses that traditionally you wouldn't see as innovators. So people in the print sector, people think of them as kind of laggards, but we've been working with Vistaprint now for 3 years, and they were really ready for when kind of COVID hit. They were able to launch Vistaprint masks, and they did that in weeks. And so that's from writing code to generating millions in revenue in weeks. And that's because they have all these Lego pieces. They're already powering their site, and they're effectively just rebuilding the Lego, and they're out and ready to go. So it's interesting to see that.
So they're really prepared for things to change, and because they're prepared for that and they know it's going to happen, they have the bits to be able to rapidly scale up new solutions or put new propositions in place, because they've done that work in the background to be able to do that.
Yeah, definitely. It's about building for change, whereas traditionally everyone is built for now. What are the use cases we need right now? But everything is changing so quickly, you just have to be ready for that change. So
we've seen a huge amount of stories in the media over the past year, particularly around bricks and mortar, or more traditional physical retailers. Obviously, they've had an incredibly tough time because they haven't been able to open their physical stores. But we also have seen that there are some physical retailers or retailers who have predominantly had physical stores who've done pretty well. I think there's, one thing to say would be that there is always going to be a role for physical retail. You still want to go in to a store sometimes, you still want to feel, touch, especially if you're unsure about something. Even if you've got the hundreds and thousands of reviews on a site, you still want to see it for yourself, particularly with bigger ticket items. I'm thinking, really big ticket items such as a car. You want to be able to sit in it and see what it's like. But I think, and we'll talk about this in a second, the retailers who've managed to repurpose their physical stores to be more supportive and less about selling to someone and be more about the experience and the support and answering questions have been the winners, and the ones that have actually managed to shift to move those into an online world really well. One of our customers once said, we want to change so we're not selling to people anymore in those presences. It is that support, answering questions. And you can see that in extreme examples like kind of Tesla in automotive. Not just the product is excellent, but the way they sell it is an experience centre rather than a traditional car dealership where you have the idea that you're going to be sold to by someone in a quite a hard way. And it's a very relaxed selling experience. So kind of what are the things that you're seeing again, which from those sorts of retailers that you speak to, about the balancing of physical and digital commerce?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you're definitely going to see that trend increase of digital and physical merging together. You'll see more of the frictionless payments, which will free your colleagues away from the tills and kind of bring them onto the shop floor, allow them to kind of add real value to the experience, kind of a reason to go into a physical store. But actually, when in the past, when I've talked to colleagues and I've talked to customers, one of the biggest frustrations is that they feel that customers have better access to data and to technology in their pocket than they do. And I think that really is going to have to change. Like, you're going to have to take the best of online and bring that and empower those colleagues. So reviews, the customer data, there's no one better than a human being to understand the nuances of someone's questions and their style and the trends, and really give that human kind of support, but they need to be supported with the right data. And we're kind of seeing that from our customers. Again, Lego's customer, they're really kind of connecting, and Ulta Beauty in the US are now seeing the stores as a rich place to collect data about your customer. It's a brilliant place to have those more connected journeys of wish listing something online, coming to see it in store, or having the experience in store and putting that into a basket. It's great to kind of see some of this shiny technology kind of coming into stores, and actually technology into store is not new. We've been seeing it the last 15 years, but up until recently it was quite gimmicky. Felt a lot like it was tech for tech's sake, and quite often I'd read a press release and then go into a store in a few months to see it, and it was in a corner with dust on it, or it just wasn't there anymore. It's because it had been built by maybe a small group in the company or an agency, and it wasn't connected to the rest of the ecosystem. It wasn't delivering value. So yeah, it's interesting to see, like, within the makeup space, kind of artificial intelligence, face recognition with AR putting makeup on. That's great, but kind of what is the jumping off point? And if you look at brands like Charlotte Tilbury, they've been doing some really interesting things about what is the next step. Like, their beauty consultants are their biggest asset, and a lot of them were at home and couldn't be in the store. So how do you bring those beauty consultants into the home of the customer? So not only are they demonstrating, educating, showing the product on themselves, but they're adding that product to a wish list or some way for the customer to find it later. So once they've had the considered education, they can go and buy. So all of this stuff isn't rocket science, but until recently it's been really difficult to do. And now we're seeing these systems and technology in place that allows that rapid kind of experimentation and prototyping.
So again, it's a kind of change in mindset of those sorts of organizations, where they don't see kind of a sales assistant's role as purely being in a physical store. It's also to support the online journey. As you said, we've seen with some of our clients a massive adoption of live video shopping, kind of that type of QVC type of experience. With a microphone, but it's worked extremely effectively for them, where they've been able to demonstrate how to use those products in the best possible way. And then embedded within that video, for example, that YouTube video, you have calls to action to be able to buy the products there and then without having to leave and go to somewhere else to buy them. So, during that consideration phase, really trying to get people to buy. Certainly those sorts of clients that I've just said, a big benefit of the past year has been forced experimentation, where, a client has wanted to do something for years, and there's always been internal friction or politics or something stopping them from doing it, or just being scared to trying something new. And then actually we have to do something now, we have to try something new, and being able to, let's go, let's try it, let's see what's the worst that can happen. We had a good example of an automotive client who all their dealership networks just shut down, so they couldn't actually sell the products anymore. And we've been talking to them about adding live chat to their website for years. And there's always the dealers won't like it, or country markets won't like it, or whatever. And we had a chat on the first day of lockdown of, do you think we should try it? And 2 days later it was there, and people were interacting, and it was actually quite successful for them. So again, that forced experimentation, any examples that you can see?
Yeah, that's definitely seen. One of our customers, Pret a Manger, I think if you spoke to them a number of years ago, they would say that they weren't really a technology business. They really cared about making sure the tills worked, making sure the ingredients got to shop in time, and that was really what. And then more recently, they've really become this incredible rate of acceleration of their technical maturity. And I remember going to first meet them, and they'd kind of got a small kind of skunk works handful of people, and they'd managed to take our free trial, take the product APIs, plug it to a sandwich printer, and had it printing sandwiches in like 2 or 3 hours. And I think that is where we're seeing the future, is people can rapidly prototype, get something into a couple of stores, test and learn, validate, prove. I mean, that used to happen before, but it tends to used to be a hack. And then once it's proven, you then have to go away and rebuild it. And that was a huge expense to make it enterprise grade. But this new cloud native technology means that, okay, you might need to improve the UI a little bit, you might need to harden it a little bit, but fundamentally, it is the same product that you can then push across all your different stores. And kind of going back to automotive, I think it's really an interesting sector. Like going back to what we're talking about, release cycles, 12 a year. Yeah. Automotive used to have one every 7 years. Yeah. And that really changed the mindset. And then a Tesla come along, and they take a software approach, and they've got daily or weekly release cycles. And we work with most of the German automotive companies, and it's been a real awakening for them. And it's been interesting to see how quickly they've been able to adapt. Again, forced experimentation because a competitor is on your doorstep and changing the way people think. And again, I think you're talking about automotive. We have a customer called Kazoo, which was a set up by Alex Chesterman, who set up Zoopla and Love Film. I think it's the fastest riser to the unicorn status in the UK, maybe the world. And that was their, that's what they wanted to achieve, is millennializing the automotive purchasing and make it more like buying an e-commerce, getting rid of that salesman experience. And it's amazing how quickly they could go live. And they built a very complicated system, of which we're only a small part, but it's a full buying the car, servicing the car, selling the car, shipping the car, returns. And they launched that in 2.5 months. And they really been able to look at what they wanted to create and say, actually, 90% of this is commodity. Let's buy those Lego blocks from people like commercetools or there's others out there. And the 10% that's really unique that we need to own, we'll build those. But because of this technology now, you can build them so quickly that they were managed to go live in 3 months, which is staggering.
Amazing. I think going back to the automotive example, the kind of the more traditional automotive and having commerce experiences within vehicles themselves is quite interesting, because I think that's just the general trend which we've been talking about, which is that instead of driving customers to a web shop, the commerce or the ability to buy things is really, for brands, is going to the places where the consumers are. So the ability, the consumer is in a car. So, perhaps that's the best point for them to buy something about their car when it's at a point in time where they need it, or, on Instagram, being able to do shopping there, or platforms like Twitch or something, be able to add commerce capabilities into those platforms. So when something interesting comes along that someone says, I like the look of that, or I like that product, there's no friction. We don't have to bounce someone off to a web shop to interrupt what they're doing. We can just start to sell to them there. On the car perspective, I thought that was relatively interesting in terms of thinking about cars as pieces of hardware and being able to turn on functionality. I know you were talking to me a little bit before that about how that works. So could we just talk about that again in terms of, cars shipping with all the features already there? Yeah,
sure. I mean, we work very closely with a company called Cariad, I think that's how it's pronounced. And they're an automotive software company built within a kind of a skunkworks within VW. I think there's thousands of them now. And they're really revolutionizing how you see the car. And one of the things that we're working with is that transactional ability within cars. So the idea, you buy your base model, and in some ways it's cheaper for them just to have the automated process of having standardization to make these cars cheaper. And they recognize a lot of customers don't buy the upgrade packages, whereas if these abilities are in the car, and when you're driving and you want the auto dimming of the headlights, or you want the reverse
camera. It's cold
camera,
and you want the heated seats.
You want the heater now. It gets like EasyJet there. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting move, is kind of switching on services as and when, and that's powered through commercetools. But going forward, the car as a transactional vehicle, kind of, do you go out and pay for petrol anymore, or will they be petrol anymore? And that's kind of the future we're seeing.
So we've talked a lot about consumers, so a very B2C orientated model. I know that quite a few people who might be joining today may be working in a more B2B setting. So what do you see as kind of the more trends on a B2B offerings, and how does the changes in technology and the way that people buy, how is that affecting B2B?
It's interesting, yeah. I mean, I think one of the things we were talking about before as well, the marketplaces and the move into B2B marketplaces, and we're seeing a lot of that. I mean, B2C marketplaces are responsible for like 50% of all e-commerce transactions, probably more now, 1.7 trillion in revenue. Yeah. But you can't just take a B2C idea and drop into B2B. There's too much complexity. It's very different business. You need different tools, different software.
Yeah.
So we are seeing some really interesting use cases that kind of...
We're seeing them, B2B companies are more likely to, rather than using traditional marketplaces, Amazon, eBay, are more likely, especially when they're selling to other businesses, to build their own. Yeah. A good example of that was the solution that our joint customer, Just Eat Takeaway, built, which was, they understood that they had a huge amount of customers, and their customers are the restaurants. And for those restaurants, they were all buying consumables, napkins, pizza boxes, packaging, plastic bags, that sort of thing. and they found that if they could bulk buy, or at least negotiate better rates because of the volume, they could pass those savings on to their customers, to the restaurants. So they built a B2B marketplace where the restaurants could log in as part of their agreement with Just Eat Takeaway. They could see all the consumables that they could order. They could order at an advantageous rate. And so they got their products, which were buying anyway, a little bit cheaper. But for Just Eat Takeaway guys, there's a huge benefit of loyalty for those restaurants, because now they're buying additional goods through them. And it's not really there to make a profit, but it's there to facilitate that loyalty between the brand and their customers, and that just happens to be advantageous to both of them. So we see that quite a lot. I remember you talking a while ago about kind of a B2B company in terms of buses. Is that correct? Kind of.
Oh yeah, I think we were talking about a little bit back to the IoT thing, and I think we were talking about it never really quite happened, this idea of dash buttons and commerce embedded in everyday devices, and potentially if you see a car as an everyday device, then perhaps that. But we are seeing actually more likely to see interesting IoT commerce use cases in B2B. We work with a bus manufacturer. It's part of one of the German automotive companies. And their systems are able to recognize when a part needs servicing, or if it's maybe needs replacing. And effectively, you've got the buses becoming the customer, ordering the product on behalf of the bus operating company. Yeah. Very Terminator, very Skynet.
Yeah.
And so when the bus arrives and it gets the service, then the part's waiting for it. There's no kind of nasty surprises. There's no waiting for delivery. The bus is not offline. It can go kind of be serviced and get
true automated, just-in-time kind of ordering. Wow.
And I think Rolls-Royce are doing very similar things in the aviation space with their engines. I think they recognise and ping to the satellites that, okay, this part potentially needs replacing. It's an interesting world. Yeah.
I guess we can't have a conversation about commerce and what's happened in the past year without talking about direct-to-consumer and the model of moving, or brands, B2B brands, moving to a more D2C offering. We've seen a lot of brands, particularly B2B, have created kind of their own B2C offering by going direct to consumer, whether that's creating their own brand, which perhaps sometimes competes against their existing channel partners. But we've seen it particularly a lot in consumer packaged goods companies, where it seems to be another form of experimentation, where they're saying, okay, we usually sell through third-party resellers, let's have a go at selling direct to consumers. From what we've seen, the companies that we speak to and work for and implement these solutions for, they don't just see it as a revenue driver to get more revenue, they also see it as a way to collect more data about their customers and understand consumer buying trends, which sometimes they don't get access to through their normal reseller channels, because they don't get that. All they're doing is a wholesaling. They're selling the products and they don't actually see what the trends are, where things are moving, and that sometimes isn't beneficial when they're doing new product developments, as in what is the market saying, what we're doing. So we do see a lot of D2C startups is more about trying to get data than it is about, obviously they still want to make revenue, but getting revenue. So again, what do you see from your customers moving to D2C, or customers you've spoken to who are trying to experiment in that?
Yeah, I suppose it's not necessarily a new trend, D2C. I think they're kind of the Dollar Shave Clubs of the world.
Yeah, and that sort of thing.
And I think I saw one the other day called Who Gives a Crap? It's a toilet paper brand, D2C brand. Yeah. So they've been nibbling at the heels, and they recognise they've had to do something for a while. Actually, one of the biggest CPG companies in the world has recently become a customer, and it's been very interesting to learn about that company and learn about their journey and sort of their rapid acceleration into tech maturity. I mean, it's a difficult business to work within, CPG. There's lots of brands, they're highly federated, there's lots of regions, and actually what we're seeing in a lot of the areas is a bit of a Wild West situation. Every brand's going out and throwing its own Shopify site up, which is brilliant for proving a model, seeing that there is a behavior there, people will buy, but the challenge is you've got to be careful not to stumble into the same issues that retailers have kind of created for themselves. You've got very lucky to a position where you've got the latest technology now. You can almost greenfield something, and what we're really seeing is that maturity in CPG, where they've recognised moving to kind of microservices, headless, cloud, API-centric type models, as they realise it's a win-win. It's a win for the business as kind of a headquarters business, exactly what you're saying. You want a central view of data. Your whole strategy is to increase the lifetime value of that customer. You need to learn more about them across the different brands. Whereas it's all kept up in different sites, then you're not getting that data. Also, you need that data around transactions and trends around what people are buying what. So with this approach, they can build the services, the engine, and then give those APIs to the brand and say to the brand, go wild, go build whatever experience, talk to the customer in the way your brand wants to talk to them, but don't worry, the stable infrastructure is behind you, but you have the freedom. So everyone wins, they get the data, the brand get the experience, and it's really allowed them to do all sorts of interesting things. I think yourself as an agency, and I used to be in an agency, and it was always great when you worked with particular retailers that had great APIs because it allowed you to do so many more exciting things. I'm not sure if you've got any examples of that.
I think customers or our clients who've started to move to that world, first of all, the clients who have started to embrace that sort of thing are the more forward-thinking companies. And so they are more open to experimentation. They are more also, a lot of the work now is about proposition, not just technology, not just how do we fit the microservices together. As you say, it becomes quite commodity. So it's more about how do we make it as seamless as possible for the end customers, the consumers. And so that's all about really understanding the purchase journey in terms of, what are the barriers, what are the questions at each point in time, what different channels can we use to communicate with them, so it's not just a web shop, it's kind of mobile devices, mobile apps, that sort of thing. But a big thing, especially with the D2C customers, has been about proposition. It's like we can't undercut some of our retailers at the moment, and we don't want to actually compete against them because we're just cannibalizing. We're selling it anyways, we're just cannibalizing our own sales. So how do we put in new propositions of subscription models, new ways to bundle products that you don't usually see? I remember PepsiCo launching their D2C offering at the start of the pandemic, and it was about, instead of buying kind of your multi-pack crisps or whatever, of all ready salted or the traditional ones, you could build your own multi-packs the way that you wanted to do it, which is something that the retailers, their retail partners, could never offer because they're not the manufacturer, but as a manufacturer you can do that. So finding those new propositions is the exciting thing, I think, and the way that we see kind of the innovation to move for those retailers. And as you say, being able to have really solid technology foundations allows you to experiment quite quickly, quite easily with them.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. And if you look at, it seems to be either on two levels. Either buying the product is difficult, awkward. Pet food, for example, 10, 20 kilo bags of pet food. I'd rather have that delivered. Or as you're saying, kind of more on the customizations. Like if you go to M&M's, you can put your own logo, your own face on an M&M. That seems to be where the world's going. And again, to this more subscription-based model. And
I'm a sucker for it as well. Pet food using, I think Tails.com, where it's you put my name of the pets, the dog's name, and so when the dog food arrives, it's actually got the name of the dog. Yeah. It's just the small things that kind of make you smile and think, oh, actually, that's a bit special, a bit of a treat. Yeah. And more often than not, then you subscribe, and then you're a customer for the next year. So we've talked a little bit about kind of the opportunities and where people are moving towards, and what we've seen working quite well. What do you think is keeping people awake at night about what's coming up, especially with the move back to kind of normality, or if I call it normality? What do you think is starting to keep people awake at night?
I suppose through COVID, I sound like a broken record, but it is those ones that have struggled with the technology. Things that were kind of important to have, but weren't life or death, have become really, really difficult. Things like a view of your stock in store. Yeah, useful thing to have, but if you don't have that now and the stores are closed, how can you put a colleague in store to do ship from store? How do you do click and collect? You can't take that product and put it all in the warehouses because the warehouse is not big enough, and especially if you're in fashion and your products are very trend, you've just got dead stock. Yep. So, that's having stock sat in the stores must be the biggest nightmare, especially when it's got a shelf life. So I imagine that keeps people up, and that's what we've heard. And sometimes customers have the good situation of, you saw a lot in the pandemic, certain retailers having unprecedented amount of traffic, and you saw their websites go down, or you saw those queuing systems. Yeah, it really frustrates customers. It's lost sales, And that comes from them not having cloud native technology that can auto scale. If you build an AWS, you build an GCP, then you can auto scale, and you shouldn't have those issues. So that's, I think, some of the key technology underpinnings that have kind of let some retailers down.
Okay.
I think you've helped quite a lot of retailers in this kind of transition period, and you kind of, as things are opening up, what do you think is going to stick? Do you think the video stuff, or do you think?
I think live video chat or live video shopping, for example, is going to stick.
Yeah.
As you said, it's a new way of reusing assets we've already got, which is product experts, which is what a lot of sales assistants actually are. They're experts in the product. They've seen how other customers have been successful with the product. So they really are experts, and unleashing that knowledge, which is currently it's difficult because you can only deal with one customer at a time. To be able to go out and broadcast on video where you might be speaking to 100 or 500 or 1,000 at a time, scalability, you can start to scale that solution. So we see that. I think the other thing is people are nervous about moving from their own channels, like the web shop, which they own on their own domain, into moving into experiences or channels or touch points, such as social media, where you can buy. I think people see a huge benefit because we've seen a lot of brands be very successful, but people also struggle with it because they're not owning the conversation that happens around it. Particularly, an Instagram post, lots of people put negative comments or feedback, and how do they deal with that? Where on their own website, they can control that as much as possible. So yeah, I see that being a big thing in people as we move forward to doing things. I think the other big thing is just general remote working, which I'm sure you see with some of your clients, where working with traditional monolithic, as you call them, systems, the traditional e-commerce systems, aren't particularly well set up for that remote working, with people in distributed teams in different locations, being able to talk, manage releases, and that I can see is a big driver to people moving to more cloud offerings. We still had retailers that we spoke to and commerce customers that we spoke to would never consider putting anything on the cloud. We want it as close to our ERP system, and the ERP system is, in that server room there, and it needs to be as close as possible, and that's where we want it. But a lot of those friction points and a lot of those things seem to have gone away. We still get a few who kind of want to, keep an eye on their data physically as close as possible, but the friction of people moving to a cloud environment has pretty much gone, which I couldn't say 12 months ago. I would still say there was some we were speaking to who were very nervous about that and moving to those systems. So again, I guess you speak about that every day to clients.
Yeah. I actually haven't heard it for, as you say, a year, at least 18 months. I'm just thinking that, I can't remember. It occasionally used to pop up, and we tend to speak to slightly more technically mature customers who are kind of, the cloud conversation has already been won. But it's interesting what you talk about contextual commerce. We're definitely seeing that increase. Danone, for instance, one of their drivers for using commerce tools is this idea of putting the transaction, not for the post-web shop area, so not pushing people to your channels anymore. So if someone's on a blog, mother and baby blog, they can transact there and there. Same with CNBC Universal. They use this for their universal checkout, very well named, and that enables people to check out in a video or in an article. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, I think just wrapping up before we move on to any questions, if there are any questions, that is the trend we're seeing is taking the commerce experience and those multiple experiences to where the customers are and not driving them to particular web shops is what we're seeing more and more. Anything you'd like to add before we move on to questions?
No, not really. I think yes. I think it was one of the kind of what your advice would be to these retailers, and I always think I think for us, you need somebody in your business that understands the movement of technology. They at least senior management, preferably on the C-suite, and they have to have kind of a foot in technology and a foot in retail. And I think that's a good starting point on the journey. You don't necessarily need to be a John Lewis or a Lego. You can just start there. So some of this might all seem like it's impossible for us. It really isn't. You just start with that one person, and if you have a good SI partner in place, they can help you on this journey.
What can smaller businesses do? Because we talk a lot, and all the examples we've given are bigger brands, let's say, who perhaps have the resources to even, to do that, not the experimentation, but a lot of the brands we've given examples of are bigger companies or more enterprise level customers. For a smaller brand, let's say not a startup brand, but a more traditional brand who are a little bit smaller and who want to start up with things, what kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah, we do see them. They do tend to have that a technology leader, even if they're a small business. There might be one person that was a developer. So work with brands like 66 North and Derrick Rose, not massive businesses, but they really embrace. They see omnichannel is important. Yep. And you can now deliver this technology at such a lower cost. You kind of just need to know about it. And it's always going to be more expensive than doing Shopify, but actually, if you then look at these models and the way that they're delivered in a metered way, you're paying cents upon a transaction. So it is open to everybody. It is.
And I think that's a big part is the pay as you use model rather than, okay, we need to build an e-commerce solution, so we've got to go and buy a piece of software, we've got to do a very large implementation project. But increasingly, part of the way that people buy things is pay as you use, so you're paying a percentage of transaction fee. So I do see smaller businesses kind of being more open to that because they build it into their operational costs rather than it being a big capital expenditure to get going. So I think from a smaller business perspective, there is lots of opportunity for them to reuse all these Legos blocks, all these reusable building blocks which are there, available in the cloud, and you can just start to use and experiment. So I think there's less than 10 minutes left, so I do want to move it over to questions. And so all my questions are on my mobile phone. So what I'm going to do is quickly open up. You're going to beat me to it, James?
I can't see the questions, though. Over
okay.
To you. I think I'm blind. Oh, live discussion. Here we go.
Let's see. I'm having a few problems accessing my question.
Well, this,
here we go.
Attorney. I thought I'd said something I shouldn't have said. But no.
Okay, so one of the questions was, how do you see small business incorporating the digital journeys online if stores, if digital is something newer to their business model? Again, I think that's something we've just covered slightly. A lot of these things, you don't need to build out the full digital commerce experience that you'd expect with kind of a larger online retailer, but there are lots of building blocks, SaaS-based products that you can utilize now to be able to build out these experiences at a good quality without having to necessarily have the engineering experience to build these things together. And a good example of experimentation, I was speaking to a relatively small business the other day, they were looking at adding full automation to their production lines, and they'd gone out pre-pandemic to a very large system integrator to say, how do I add the IoT devices and then the cloud software to automate? And we were quoted 6-7 figures to be able to do this, and the board were considering it because of the benefits. At the start of the lockdown, they had to automate a lot of the processes because the people had to be removed from the production line. And so they would just started getting Raspberry Pis, building things on cloud technologies. And within 2 weeks, they had a rudimentary system up and running where they were proving it was working. So I think it is seeing what's on the market, seeing what's available to buy as a pay-as-you-use, experiment, see how you go, and then is it worth the actual investment to go a little bit further once you've proven the business case for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not for everybody. You have to really look at your business and say, what is e-commerce technology to you? Is it an enabler? Is it just a channel? Are we just selling things through it? And if that's the case, then you probably you only really want a vanilla type solution. You've got to put some basic use cases. And then there are brands out there that say, no, actually, commerce technology for us is a differentiator. And that's kind of how we're going to win in the marketplace. And that's the people who need more of this open microservices, cloud native. So it's definitely, when we speak to customers quite often, because now we're leaders in Gartner and Forrester, we get calls. And we're quite quickly sometimes think, no, these aren't really for us. There's not going to be they don't have anyone in the business that truly understands why they're doing this. It's So that, and we're often very, very open, and there are others out there that we recommend, but it's very easy to spot who are our customers, and it is that understanding kind of the way the technology is going and that kind of more technically mature.
Question here is, how digitally mature as an organisation do you need to be to use these new technologies?
That was a good talk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, what's the minimum bar almost? And personally, to start off, I don't think it's about kind of IT specialisms or development specialisms. Yeah. It's about how open you are to doing these things. Yeah. Because for me, you don't need to be, you don't always need developer experience to be able to put these things together. You agree?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this kind of organizational readiness is something we talk to customers a lot. Yeah. And you can be a John Lewis, you can be a Lego, and you can be that kind of more of a cutting edge, but you don't need to be. You do need someone there who understands and has that, and can talk to the C-suite and explain and translate some of the value of these technologies and why they are a value to the business. But I think I mentioned Danone, they're a really good example of, I think they have that technology leader and they have ready product managers. But other than that, everything is dealt with by the SI in collaboration with existing members, so that they don't actually have any developers in their business.
Yeah, I think it's more about being brave and having a go, being able to demonstrate whether something's going to work or not, which is much better than writing a business case in a large organisation, or, you know, worrying about whether it's going to cost too much money to build this out or do things yourself or hire an agency or whatever. Is actually do a proof of concept yourself, see if it's going to work, see if your thoughts and ideas are going to work. And it now costs, as you said, pennies to do that rather than thousands of pounds or millions of pounds as we've seen before.
Yeah, and doing those lean UX trials, it doesn't even need to be a technology trial. I was working with a lingerie company and we were talking about their vast majority, they open click and collect and it became 50% of their business before they realized. And we're talking about how we can improve the experience for those collecting the parcels, because it was very much kind of, oh, it's underneath the stairs, we'll go get it for you. And they wanted to move on. And we just said to them, look, get some in the depot, pick 2 stores, just write some customer information inside the package that you're going to give to a customer to help them with the upsell. Yeah. So when they open the packet to give to the customer, there was some information about the customer. Oh, you probably want to try it on with these. And then they used that information, saw the upsell value, did the maths and worked out, okay, this is worth several millions to our business. And then they automated it and put it into software. So it's about kind of having that mindset of agility and speed, but also having the technology to support it as well.
One last question, and within like 20 seconds.
Oh, okay.
Got a question about virtual reality and augmented reality. Gimmick or not? What's your personal view on that? What do you think? 20 seconds.
I think augmented reality has legs. Virtual reality, I think, is you're so, for anything apart from gaming, you're so locked in away from the world. That's not an experience. But augmented reality, I think, has legs.
Yeah, I think augmented reality, the gateway into that will be through the social apps that you have at the moment and being able to interact in a fun way while introducing your product. I think that's where I see it being less gimmicky. It's still a bit of a gimmick, but I think as the technology increases and things become more lifelike, then certainly it'll become more realistic.
I've used my VR headset maybe 10 times. It's now got dust on in the corner.
Gimmicky then. There we go. Right, that's the end of it. Thank you very, very much for joining us. I hope you enjoyed our sometimes random discussion about things. Please, if you do have any questions after this that come up, then please send them. You've got my details on here. Please send them directly. But thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day.